Nour Hadidi, you are a woman, you are Muslim, you are Arab, you are a comedian, and you gave up a career in finance in order to become a comedian. So I'm just full of questions. First of all, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Elaine. Uh,
So, Noor, I met you about 5 years ago at a comedy night, and this is a place where people are, telling their jokes, getting drunk, and all this. And the last thing I expected to see was an Arab Muslim woman getting on stage and telling jokes herself. And not only that, but you, to my eyes, you look like a kid. You look like you should be carded before going into that kind of club. So, yeah, can we start by you telling us a little bit about your background? Are you first of all an immigrant, or are you first generation here? Or what's Tell us about how you came here.
okay, yeah, sure. So I am an immigrant. It's very funny that kind of described all the things that I am because, you don't really expect, or like when you go to a comedy show, you don't really know what you're gonna see, and you never really expect someone like me to be on stage. But I feel like that's changed in the past 5 years, and since we've met, and it's something that I see changing in comedy. So I moved to Canada 14 years ago to study at McGill. I was born and raised in Jordan in the Middle East, and my family, they're all doctors. They wanted me to be a doctor. I said no. I'm scared of needles. I don't think this is going to work for me. So I got into McGill. I got into their uh, like business school, and I decided to major in finance because I'm better with numbers than say marketing or stuff like that. And then I worked in banking for 4 years, and I think that's around the time that you and I met in Montreal.
Right.
And then I had started doing stand up maybe my second year at the bank. It's just something that I've always loved. Ever since I was a kid in Jordan, I've always comedy, comedy shows. Uh, Funny movies like Mrs. Doubtfire or Father of the Bride. And I was just always drawn to it, and I could never tell you why. And then when I was at McGill, I had seen a few stand up comedians do tours, and it's something that I've always wanted to do. And so when I was working in finance, I was studying for this really hard exam called the CFA. I don't know if you've heard of it. Yeah.
Yes, I failed it twice.
Oh, me too.
Good, good.
I passed level one, but I started doing comedy around the same time I did level two, and I just was like, whatever. And then I didn't really study for it because I didn't have the passion for it. I just was doing it because everyone else in my department was doing it, which is like a lesson learned early on in life. Is like, and something that I also apply to comedy is like, don't do. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh,
It's okay.
I do not disturb. I'm so sorry. Okay, what is happening? Oh no, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
I put my do not disturb on. I forgot to do that. Okay.
So you are working at a bank, you are studying for this CFA. After you pass this CFA, I mean, the starting salary for this kind of person with this title is about $100,000 and up. I mean, that's just to start. And you have all the prestige of being, which I think you were working for one of the big banks in Montreal. So you have this huge apparatus behind you. You got the degree, you have this high salary.
Yeah.
Are you crazy?
Well, I just want to say when you first started, I don't think it was 100 grand. It was closer to like 55. When you're fresh out of the uh, fresh out of school. But yeah, I was there for 4 years, and it kind of built and got to the point that's closer to the 100K range. Um, and I feel very fortunate, because a lot of people, when they go to school and they graduate, they don't have degrees like that are able to give them jobs that pay that well. But I think it's a combination of things. I think um, I will say my first 2 years at the bank, I really enjoyed my work and I found it fulfilling. But I've learned that no amount of money is enough when your job isn't fulfilling because you feel chained to the desk. You don't feel happy. It doesn't bring you joy. Um, so that's something I've learned, and nobody really gets into comedy for the money. I honestly never thought this could be my job. I always thought it would be something fun and something I did on the side while I worked in finance. I never in my wildest dreams thought I could do it, but things just kind of happened for me. I don't know how to explain it. Like, I worked really hard, and I kind of had a list of goals in my mind for things I wanted in comedy. And then so what happened is I used to work in finance, but then around the 4-year mark, I was kind of getting tired of Montreal, both from the French language, because I would interview for a lot of jobs that I wouldn't get. And also with comedy, I was doing comedy maybe 3 times a week, but that's not enough for you to get better as a comedian. That's the bare minimum. So I knew that for both finance and comedy, I needed to move to Toronto. And I got a job working in consulting for financial
But
services.
let me stop you for a second. Uh, most people, and I have had this interview several times with professional public speakers. Most people are just terrified to death to stand in front of a crowd and say something. I mean, I went to Toastmasters International to learn how to speak in public, and the first year I was practically pooping in my pants because I was so afraid and terrified of having a group of people looking at me. So now you are telling me, can you tell me about your first experience of you standing in front of a group of people and trying to say something funny? Was it even funnier?
Yeah, so the first time I did stand up was at an open mic night in Montreal at a club called the Comedy Works. Unfortunately, that club doesn't exist anymore. It shut down a few years ago. Um, but what had happened is one of those comedians I had seen when I was an undergrad. Um, he was a local comedian in Montreal, and I had spoken to him, and I was like just asking him questions before I wanted to try stand up. I was like, "Where do you do this? How could I go about it if I did?" So he told me about this club and the open mic night, and it stayed in my head. And then the summer I graduated from McGill, I was looking for a job and I wasn't able to find one, but I had so much time on my hands that I thought, I'm going to try and do this. So in the summer that I graduated, I did stand up twice. The first time, and I was 22 at the time. You have to remember that when you're young, you do things that you may
Mm,
not
yes,
necessarily have the courage to do when you're older. I
right.
always say if I started now, I don't think I would. I think it's a lot harder the later you do it in life. But I also think that some of the comics who start later in life have a perspective and have things to talk about. So it's like it's a toss of a coin, right? Um, so I did that. I went to an open mic night. All my friends were in the audience. They were very supportive. I did a set. It went well. I was like, oh, this is fun. I could do this. I was obviously nervous, looking at the ground, kind of like not really sure what I'm doing. Um, but it went, I would say, well. I went back the second week.
Let me interrupt you. Okay, so you ask these questions. Okay, you see your friends who is doing this comedy night, and you feel intrigued, and you want to take the plunge and do it. Okay, so first of all, what do? You start collecting jokes all throughout the day, and do you even practice in front of a roommate or a best friend or something, or you just plunge in there without knowing what's going to happen?
You have to prepare. I mean, I went to McGill. I have a degree in finance, so I prepare. It's my background, it's what I do. So I actually just like I looked up articles on how to write jokes. I bought a book on how to called Comedy Writing Secrets, and I kind of just wrote some jokes out, and I memorized them over and over again before I went up on stage, and I did them.
Okay, and is this something like to be honest, I would be totally afraid, but is this something that I could just go to practically a bar that offers these open mic things and I can just go there and stand and tell jokes, or is there some kind of procedure before someone allow me to take a microphone?
Yeah, that's the thing. The comedies, there's very little barriers to entry, So pretty much anyone can sign up at an open mic and get on stage and tell jokes. I think in a smaller city like Montreal, open mics tend to have audiences, people who are not comedians. So if you start in a smaller city, you're actually able to get on stage with very little effort and to perform for people. Whereas in a city like Toronto, it's very big, it's much more competitive. So if you were to do an open mic, it would probably be to other comedians in the crowd, and that's a much harder thing process and way to start out doing comedy.
Okay, and then so that first night, tell me a little bit about if any fear that you felt at that moment.
I was petrified.
Really?
Of course, I was like, you just want to be funny, you just want to do well. Oh my God, I actually have a photo here of my first time. That's crazy.
Okay.
This is a poster from the first show I ever hosted and produced with my friend Rachel. This was years after, but this is actually a photo from my first time on stage. That's so,
Okay.
and I look cool and calm and composed, but I'm not. Like, it's an act. You're pretending.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and I don't know how it is. When I went to see you one time, it was mostly men.
Yeah.
So what is it like? Is it still the same? And are they still doing all fart jokes and like all these sexual innuendo jokes, or has it progressed to different kind of comedy?
That's a really good question because when we met, it was like 5 years ago in Montreal, and those two things factor into that show, and they still factor into a lot of other shows. I'd say, uh, I think it's gotten a lot. It's not easy to start as a woman. Honestly, I'm now like pay my bills and I'm a professional stand-up comedian and writer in Canada, but to get here, you have to be so good as a woman to be on a show with like mediocre men doing stand up. You're not given the same benefit of the doubt as men are. It feels like a boys club a lot of times. Yeah, it's like the lineup is 8 guys and then one woman or one person of color, and unfortunately that's just how comedy has been for so long. But since then, since I've moved to Toronto, things have definitely changed. There's a very big um, uh, much bigger scene here for women. There's a lot of shows that only book women and non-binary performers. So there's a lot of spaces that are carved out to help support women who want to do stand-up, but don't want to go through these shitty open mics where they have to feel like endangered or they might have to hear a joke that's so horrible. And I find that also audiences want that. Audiences want to go out and watch a diverse comedy show and they want to see themselves reflected on stage as opposed to like 5 guys named Jeff and then me.
Right. Okay, but you are also another thing. You are not just a woman. You are you are a Muslim and you are Arab. I mean, I get the idea that Muslim women are supposed to be prude and I don't know, maybe nothing to do with the alcohol culture of going out at night and I so maybe it's just my imagination or what I see in the media. So can you tell me what is it like to be Muslim, young, not bad looking, and in this kind of environment?
Yeah, I just think that stereotype is so outdated, like
Mm.
um I just think like we're all people, we're all multifaceted and layered, and for me to be a Muslim woman doesn't mean that I have to fit into this one way that the world perceives Muslim women, right?
Right.
I practice there's levels to Islam just like there's levels to any other religion, and I practice it to the level that I want. But unfortunately, that's not what you see in the media, or those aren't the stories of Muslim people that you hear, you
Right.
know? And when I started, there was one Muslim female comedian also performing in Montreal. Her name was Iman. And now in Toronto, there's 2 other Muslim women named Hodo and Salma.
Right.
And it's very frustrating because a lot of times me and Hodo will be confused for the same person. But Hodo and I look nothing alike. Our comedy is not alike. She's black. I'm not. She wears a hijab. I don't. But people just think Muslim women, you're all the same. So they'll tag me as her. They'll give me sometimes her credits or her introduction. And it's incredibly frustrating. But just like there's 5 white guys who are allowed to be on a show and no one asks them if they're different, you should have 5 Muslim women on the show and you should be able to tell that we're different,
Right.
you should be able to tell us apart. It's a double standard,
Okay.
you know
Okay. So, okay, we got past that. You went to the first few shows and you are getting stressed or frustrated over your work. So, then tell us more about this um, going from professional in finance to a comedy professional.
Yeah, so the first two times I did stand up was the summer I graduated. So that was I did once I bombed the second time, it hurt so much and I didn't do stand up again. And then 2 years later, when I was at the bank and I was studying for my level two CFA, so when I was like, I feel so down, I'm just so tired. What would make me feel good? What would bring me joy? And it was stand up. And so I started doing stand up again in 2012. It was April 2012, and I haven't stopped since. And so what happened in those 2 years that I had been in, or there was 3 years in Montreal, where when you're first starting out, basically it's just the comedy club open mics that you're performing at, but you do them enough and you meet comedians backstage, so they start putting you on their shows. And that's a really big factor in comedy. A lot of your work, even 8 years later, is going to come from other comedians. They're going to get opportunities. They're going to want to work with you. They're going to want to book you. So it's a very communal um, job. And so I started meeting all these comedians. I started going to every show I could. I just wanted to get better. You can never feel like you're too good for any opportunity or any stage. And that's something I still believe in now. I'm very grateful for every time I am able to get on a stage, even if it's for three people. These are three people who are there. They're there. They want to sit. They want to listen. They want to laugh. They're giving me their time and attention. I always feel like that's the thing about comedy. It's very humbling. Rejection and bombing is built in. It's based in it. Your head will never get too big. Once your head gets big, you're going to be hit with a bomb, you know? And so in Montreal, I was just working on my craft, working on my act. I actually took a 3-month sabbatical leave from the bank. I went to New York. I did open mics there. I took a writing class, like a comedy writing class, and I came back. And what I honestly, my goal there was just to start doing weekend spots at the club, because when you're in comedy and you do the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the open mic nights, the pro-am nights, they're not perceived as they're amateur. But what would happen is a lot of headlining comedians, some people you may have seen on TV or on YouTube, they'll come in and they'll have a whole weekend of shows. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and they're performing for 45 minutes. And the way a comedy show is structured at a club is you have a host who, is the MC. You have an opening spot, 5 to 7 minutes. You have a middle spot, which is 15 to 20. And then you have the headliner. And he's the one who's selling the tickets and bringing people in. So when you're first starting out in comedy, all you really want is to just get that opening 5 to 7 minute spot. It's like such an accomplishment. It's what we're all working on. So if anyone here was like thinking of doing comedy, or they just started out, well, they can't now because it's a pandemic. But usually when people reach out for advice, I say when you first start, what you really want to focus on is getting a solid 5 minute set together. Use the same 5 minutes, get on stage, hone it, edit it, get it in a place where it works, get it in a place where you know it like the back of your hand, the order. And so that way, when you get an opportunity to do an opening set or to showcase, like audition for a festival, you have that set together. And then you will see that the skills that you want in comedy will just build off of that. When I first started and someone would host and they'd be so easy with the audience, I'd be like, I want to do that. I want to be able to talk to the audience and make a joke about their name or what they do. And it just happens naturally. If you focus on the 5 to 7, and then once that 5 to 7 is done, you work on a new 5 to 7, you're getting comfortable on stage. You're getting in front of different types of people, ages, backgrounds, different kinds of rooms. You're doing rooms for like students or adults. So you're kind of growing without even knowing it. Um, and so when I had started at it basically took over my life. So all this progression, when I went to New York, I kind of got better from doing 2, 3 open mics every single night. And I came back to Montreal and I felt like I was a stronger performer. But unfortunately, the Comedy Works Club had shut down. And so there was one club left in town. It was called the Comedy Nest. And then that New Year's, I got my first ever weekend. It's this weekend they had called Young Guns of Comedy, where they pick 5 up-and-coming comedians and they give them a weekend. So they give them like 10 minutes each instead of bringing in a headliner with the opener and whatnot. And so that was such a big deal. And it felt like, oh, all this work that I've been putting for like 2.5, 3 years is finally paying off. And then I got an opportunity. And at the same time with finance, I was interviewing for jobs because, you know, comedy was fun and I had taken over and I was really good at it, but I never in my wildest dreams thought that I could pay my bills from it. And I was still invested in finance. Like I'm the type of person that I do derive joy from doing a good job. So while I had outgrown my position in risk management because it years, I was interviewing for other jobs that I wanted to work like in a front office position. Like I had interviewed for a job in the corporate banking. I had interviewed for a job in like a sales and trading team in the bank. But unfortunately, it felt like my French, as much as I would work on it, it was never good enough. And I would never be able to fit in or say work with the bank's clients at the level that they wanted me to. And it's incredibly frustrating because it's something that a lot of immigrants feel when they go to Quebec. You know, you feel like you have to work so hard to just be considered with the bare minimum with the all the other people interviewing for the position. So, and I had been traveling a lot for comedy as well. When I lived in Montreal, I would go to Toronto, I would go to New York. You know, I would apply to festivals in Cleveland. I would try to do as many festivals as also to meet other comedians who live in different cities, and that's a really fun part of comedy, is getting to go to a festival and having comedians from literally all over North America and getting to be part of the show and watching them and being friends with them and over the years seeing them at different festivals. Um, and it was just fun. You know, you can't really compare analyzing a financial statement of a financial institution to expressing yourself via a joke and having people laugh at it. You know, you feel
Right.
seen in a way that no corporate job will make you feel seen.
Well, okay. Well, let me tell you, I study finance and I fail in part as well because although I spoke French, my French was never good enough. It was never Quebecois enough.
Yes,
And people just will ignore me. I mean, even speaking English, I have a Spanish accent, but I don't feel so much discriminated against when I speak English. But when I speak French and I have my Spanish accent, it's almost like I become non-existent. And this is one of the things that I find painful about this province. I really like it here, but at the same time, uh, I I I feel discriminated against, and there is all laws coming up every day. I think the other day there's a new thing about not using the word takeout when you order some food over the phone or application, and then restaurants get fined whenever they put pasta or espresso or cappuccino because those are not French words, you know. So if you are not francophone with the proper Quebecois accent, you feel like you are a citizen. So I feel your pain in that.
thank you. Yeah, and I love Montreal. You know, I left my home. It's to live there for 8 years. It's the first place I got my own apartment. It's the first place I had my first real job. I've had so many like wonderful memories and moments in that city, and I love coming back and visiting. But they just make it really hard for people who immigrate there to feel like they can succeed with all the hard work that they put in when, like you said, they're not treated the same way as someone who was born there. It's very frustrating. And I will say that leaving Quebec to Ontario, especially because the scene in Montreal was in Montreal, you could pretty much meet everyone in the comedy scene within 3 months. But in Toronto, it took me a year to meet everyone. And it pushes you to work harder. My comedy got better because I was no one again. At I started at zero. It's like I had done nothing. And there's there's a lot of times that I wanted to quit when I moved to Toronto. Truly, it was so hard, but I kept going and became a stronger writer and performer because of it.
Okay, can you tell me about you were telling us about the first few ads that you did and you bombed for the first time and you stay out of comedy for 2 years.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about the humiliation and sadness it feels like to bomb and to have no one laughing at whatever hard work you put into?
Well, it was my second time, so it's not like
I
I had
see.
put in a lot of hard work. I was doing the same set I had done the week before. But it is, and even now, 8 years in, I just remember there's some nights where, before the pandemic, I would bomb and it would hurt so much. It hurts a lot. It feels like a rejection because it's just you feel like you're trying really hard and no matter what you do you're not getting anywhere, and it's not like you can leave. You have like an 8-minute spot, so if they hate you at minute 2, guess what, you're there for 6 more minutes. And I also think that it's part of actually what makes comedians stay in comedy is because it's like it's a rush. You never know. You're excited about this new set, you're going to do it, and you don't know which way it's going to go. The more you do it, obviously, the better, the more good sets you have than bad, but you'll have a bad set sneak in. At this point, I try not to take it personally. Some nights are harder than others. And I find that the best way to get over a bomb is to get on stage again, because when you have that next set, it's done. It's like the bomb is gone. I have a new experience now. Um, and I just think it's part of comedy. Like, you got to keep working. Yeah, you had a setback, you had a rejection. This is part of the job. And the way to get over it is to do it again.
Okay, and now you are going through this transition from finance to comedy, and you are an immigrant. I don't know. I assume that your parents pay for your education coming here to Montreal. And can you tell me what's going on in your family? I also know from your comedy that your sister is a doctor. So
Yeah.
can you tell us about you telling mom, dad, I study all this, I cost this much money, but I want to be a comedian?
Right. Well, I don't think that like you should look at a degree in terms of like I learned a lot at McGill, and I think having a degree to fall back on is like such an asset. And I don't think I would have gotten where I am in comedy if I hadn't worked in finance. I developed a lot of skills working there, like just things like there's a lot of skills that comedians don't have, like networking, booking yourself, sending emails, asking for what you want. They think that it's taboo or they're afraid to ask, and they think, well, if I'll just get things. It's not cool to ask for the things I want. And actually, that's something that I learned working for 4 years in finance and 2 years in consulting. You have to ask for what you want. You have to fix your own problems. You can't be like my current managers and agents. I emailed them a few times and they rejected me, but I wanted them to represent me. So I kept with it. I didn't say, oh, they don't want me. That's it. No, like there's just so many things that overlap that help me with my comedy. So for me to say, oh, I put all this money and I worked in finance and it's all for nothing, I don't really think that. I also think it helped shape me as a person. I met so many cool people at McGill that are still my friends. I don't regret studying that or going to finance, and it
But
was honestly some of the best times of my life.
but I wanted to know about the conversation that you are having with your father or mother about you switching careers, because I'm sure that's not what they expected from you.
Yeah, so what had happened is for the 2 years that I had moved to Toronto and was working in consulting, sometimes I would have conversations, be like, if I might quit, I want to do comedy, I like it better. And they'd be like, no, you should stay in finance. Like the conversation, whenever I would try to bring it up, it would never be accepted. Comedy was never accepted as a thing. And but things were picking up for me in Toronto and I was getting more work. And what happened is I got an opportunity to write on a TV show, and I couldn't do both that and consulting at the same time. And consulting is a job where you can't really do stand up. Like I had gotten to my breaking point 2 years in, because in finance you kind of leave at 6 and you leave work but with consulting, you take it with you and you're at a client and you have your laptop. So I would go to a show and then go home and work. So to me, I was just at a point that no matter what my parents thought, I know what's good for me. And it was a very hard decision for me. I didn't ask them. I just made the decision. And it's because I feel like there's a lot of points in life where you know what's right for you and what you want for yourself. And that was one of them. And I actually I wasn't the one to tell them. It was my sister who told them a few months after. She was like, by the way, Nour quit and is now doing comedy full time. And, like, that's the other thing is that, yes, my parents helped me with my education, but since I graduated, I've been on my own. And that's part of why I did finance is because I had to. But when you're making money and you're working hard, and you're able to pay for your own expenses, no one's opinion matters except for your own, Yeah, you can tell me that I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it. No one has control over me. And it was a very scary, it was a decision I made. I had been feeling it for a while. It wasn't like, oh my God, I'm going to quit and I don't know what to do. This is a process that happened over years, where you stop deriving your joy from one thing and you start deriving it from another. So you want to do this, you want to do comedy full time. And it did change for me initially because when something is your release and your expression and it becomes your job, there's a lot of weight that becomes attached to it. And I've actually had my relationship with comedy change so many times over, since I quit. I quit in 2017 and it's now 2020. And I've gone through so many ups and downs with how I feel about comedy and what it means to me. I don't know if you want me to go into that.
Please.
So when I had first quit, I thought it was very euphoric. And you think I can finally do what I want. It's like the chains are free. But then, this used to be a thing that I would do for fun and I would never worry, where am I going to pay my bills? What am I going to do? So when you put pressure on the art to pay your bills, you have a very different relationship with it. I kind of resented it for a little bit. I resented that comedy was an art and that there was no, there's no HR, there's no ladder. I kind of was like, why? I got mad at comedy. I was like, why is there no money here? Why is there nothing? I'm good at it. People want it. And I kind of, started having these thoughts of sure, finance is not fun, but it's, people, they're shareholders in banks. And this is, part of life that's been going on for years, whereas comedy is an art. And kind of was a bit worried about where I was going to pay my bills and how I was going to make money, because writing on TV shows is on contract work. It was so hard. Also, I had an identity crisis because for 6 years I would wake up every morning and I would go somewhere and I had something to do and somewhere to be and people to be around. And then all of a sudden I'm waking up at home by myself. I have nothing to do, nowhere to be, no one to talk to. So that was such a hard adjustment. And I just, there's a lot of questions that you ask yourself in life. You don't have the time to ask yourself, or issues that you have that you push to the back because you're so busy. I was literally busy working nonstop in finance or consulting and then doing comedy. I had no time to think. And all of a sudden I had all this time to think. So it required a lot of personal growth because I had all this time to think about maybe some things that had happened in my life or just questions I had never asked myself and had pushed to the back. And then what also happened is because I'm a very competitive person, when I was trying to get out of finance for comedy, I had a list, a goal list. And I was like, I want to write on a show. I want to perform at this festival. I want to have representation because all the successful comedians that I see, they have these 3 things. So if I have these things, it means I'm successful. But what I realized is that chasing an accomplishment list is useless. It is futile because it will not bring you happiness. You could perform at the most prestigious festival, the Just for Laughs Comedy Festival. I got invited to perform there for Kevin Hart's LOL Network. And you're there and you're like, this is what I've been working for. And then you feel empty after because it's okay, I did it. And now what? I got the thing that I wanted and I'm just sitting up. My life hasn't changed. I'm still doing the same shows. And so I actually became very I wrote on I wrote on multiple shows, and whenever I would have some downtime, I would get really sad, and I was like, what's the point? I've accomplished everything that I've wanted. What's the point of comedy? And I had started going to therapy last year, and my therapist really helped me redefine my relationship with comedy. Um, and now I do it, I truly do it because I love it, because I derive joy from writing jokes. If you can't enjoy the process and be happy from that, you will never be happy. No matter if I get a Netflix special and I'm miserable and I don't enjoy comedy for what it is, I will never be happy. So you have to do the thing you love for the sake of doing it, and everything else will fall into place. That's something,
Wow.
yeah, I learned the past year.
Wow. Okay, so let me ask you something. Um, what would you say? So you took this plunge, and for you, it seems like you were uh, placed against the corner, and you had to make a decision. You couldn't do both things
No.
anymore. And you were already having some a certain amount of success as a comedian. But what would you say to a person who is right now sitting on a cubicle and wanting to do an art, whether it's painting, writing, comedy, singing, whatever, but they are too afraid to make that jump. And you made it. You maybe you were just too young to think about all the consequences, or you just were placed against the wall. But there's people who are terrified. That's the only thing that they want to do,
Yeah.
but they are just too afraid to do anything about it.
Well, I relate to them so much. And I think that they should honestly, if they think about it every day, if they should start doing it. And they should do it in whatever capacity they can that doesn't affect their livelihood. So they're in a cubicle because it pays their mortgage, it pays their rent. So, don't give all of that over starting something new. Start something new. Try it. This is, you have your whole life. You have your whole life to do this thing. Start doing it now. Do it because you love it. Get better at it. Um, and I'll be honest with you, sometimes people think that they're going to be good at something and they're not. So honestly, ask yourself, am I good at this thing that I love so much? I would love to be a singer. If I had a singing voice, I wouldn't even be a comedian. But that's not the life that, I have. So, and just do it. And you're never too old. You're never too old to do what you love in life. Yes, I started young. And yes, I quit finance when I was like 28. But I just think you live life once. Um, and if you can way that won't jeopardize your livelihood, and you can put yourself into it, invest in it, do it, get it to a point where maybe like me, you have to make a choice, or think of ways where you can make an income from this thing that you love, then why not? you know
Right.
I never regret leaving finance.
Okay. Can you tell us what is the lifestyle of a comedian? I mean, what do? You go to a bar, drink beer, see all the people telling jokes, and then wake up at noon again, or how does it work to be a comedian?
Well, being a comedian in Canada means, because we don't have a star system, in the States, you're able to be successful doing purely stand up, but in Canada, that's not really an option. So in Canada, you have to do it all. So I'm also a comedian, but also I'm a TV writer, and I go out on auditions and I do things for the radio. So it's not just, oh, I go do one show and then I wake up whenever I want. It's like a constant hustle. I remember another comedian describing it where she said being in Comedian Canada is like a quilt, making your
Mhm.
income, and you're quilting all these things together. Your ways of income, you have to do whatever voiceover work as well. You have to do as much as you can. So I'll give you an example of like when I'm writing on a show and when I'm not writing on a show. When I'm writing on a show, it takes up so much of my mental energy that's all I do. I don't even do stand up at night. I don't do open mics. I'll wake up in the morning, I'll go to the room, we'll be with a bunch of writers. We'll either write together or we'll write separately, depending on also the pressure of whether the show's on the air or if it's in development. We start around 8:30 and then we leave around 5:36. Sometimes you prepare for the next day. If it's a news-based show, you work on a sketch, you come up with sketch ideas for the week. Um, that's like kind of what the life of a TV writer is like. When it comes to pure stand-up, you're booking yourself a lot of the times. not necessarily how you make money, like a lot of big corporate events. Sure, that's how you can pay the bills. But if you're working on the act itself, you yourself are reaching out to other comedians and producers to book you on their shows this week, next week, the following week. You are, what I also do is I record all my sets. So I watch my set from the night before. I transcribe it, I write it out word for word. I'll see what worked and what didn't. What word can I remove? What can I edit? What would make it funnier? If it's a new joke, did it work or not? What are some other alternatives I can do? And then, yeah, I write my set for the shows that I have that night. If it's, sometimes it's multiple shows, so I have to say, oh, can you put me on early on this show so I can make it to the other show? Yeah, that's kind of like when it comes to the act of like stand up itself. And then sometimes you'll go on auditions. I'll have in the morning, or also I'll write in the morning. In the afternoon, I'll get on the subway. I'll go do a commercial audition, come home. Sometimes I'll do a self tape at home. And also, when it comes to TV writing, when you're not in a room, you always are writing your own stuff. So you work on your own ideas for TV shows, your own pilot, maybe sketches for if someone asks you to apply for a show, so you have some relevant and current material. So it doesn't look like it's a lot of work, but it really is.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when you're writing and you say you go to a writing room from 8:30 in the morning to, I don't know, what is it, 4:30 or 5,
Yeah.
you actually do that? You sit at a desk and you try to write all this time jokes? I cannot think of anything not funny than to do
Well,
that.
that was a really big learning experience when I wrote on This Hour Has 22 Minutes. Before that, I had only ever written stand up for myself, for my own voice. So whatever something that I thought was funny, I was able to write on. But when you're paid to write for someone else, they'll be like, okay, Justin Trudeau said this. We need 10 jokes on it. You have to exercise that muscle of writing a joke about something that you don't think is funny, because you have a deadline, 30 minutes. Okay, I'm going to need 10 jokes on this. And that's how it works. Yeah, like usually we have a meeting in the morning at 8:30. Okay, so what are some news stories that are standing out to you guys? Um, we're given a writing assignment. We each write at our own desk, whether it's a segment for the show or questions for interviews. We'll come up with ideas. Yeah, it's just parts of it are collaborative, but a lot of it is just you sitting at the desk coming up with jokes.
Wow.
Yeah, about the news cycle.
And tell me, do you use your culture, your race, your religion as part of the comedy that you use for yourself, or you try to put that aside completely?
No, my comedy is very personal. I talk about things that happen to me in everyday life. So I'm talking about my own life. If something political happens, so for example, the Muslim ban that happened a few years ago, I'm going to talk about it because it affects me. So I talk about being Arab and Muslim. And something that I also learned is that write whatever you think is funny, not what you think other people will find funny. That's always a piece of advice I'm able to give younger people who are starting out, because if you think it's funny, chances are someone else thinks it's funny and they're going to connect to you on that. And trying to write what you think other people is funny is a losing battle. You're never going to win. So I try to write stuff that happens in my life, definitely talk about my race, my background, being a woman. And I do it in a way that I feel is authentic to me, um, and people appreciate it. They're able to connect with you more on it when you're honest. That's a piece of advice I got, is when you're first starting, get on stage as much as you can and be honest. There's no shortcut to comedy, but those two things will help.
Wow, amazing. Okay, no, I have no more questions. Oh, is there anything maybe that I neglected to ask you that you would like to bring up, or maybe a joke or something?
um, I think that I love comedy so much. Unfortunately, it's not a recognized art form by the Canada Council of the Arts. So that's something that's really demoralizing here in Canada. A lot of Canadian comics, they move to America. They go to either New York or LA because you're not able to be famous or really make that much of a living um, as a comedian. Like I said, I do it all, right? But some people, they don't want to do it all. They don't want to do all these things. They just want to be stand-ups, or even if they try to do all these things, they're not able to make a living. So I would just love it if we were able to give Canadian comedians the recognition that they deserve, and to, I don't know, have some sort of star system in Canada where you're able to see someone on TV who's Canadian, and so you could go to their show and follow them, and like all the American comics have. So um, that's, kind of just something that I hope. So if people are listening to this and they're in Canada, there's a lot of great Canadian comedians who you could support, listen to their albums, follow them on social media, download their albums, buy them, buy their merch. I think it's especially during this pandemic where we're all going to comedy and art to help us get through it, right? Like, it goes both ways. We want to create it, but it's nothing. What point is it for me to create something if you guys don't get to enjoy it
Right.
and laugh? Yeah.
Okay. Well, the last question is where can people follow you? Your websites or your I don't know, all your social media handles.
Yeah, it's at Nour Hadidi, for both Instagram and Twitter, and then at Nour Hadidi Comedy on TikTok.
Nor, thank you so much.
Thank you, Alain.